That night, the rain came down in thin, cold lines across the windows of our Jersey City condo, and the whole place felt smaller than usual, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stood in the hallway, holding my son, Noah, against my shoulder, rocking him gently while listening to the sound of my husband, Scott, pacing back and forth in the living room. He kept checking his phone, wiping the screen with the edge of his sleeve like he was polishing a trophy. He told me he had a last-minute business trip to Chicago, something about a tense meeting with a client who was threatening to pull a major contract. But the way he talked, too fast, too smooth, made my stomach twist. Scott used to tell me everything. Tonight he spoke like a man rehearsing lies in a mirror. He adjusted the collar of his crisp white shirt, the one he usually saved for celebrations, not emergency flights. I noticed a new cologne drifting from him. Something sharp and ocean clean that I had never smelled in our home before. He tossed a sleek suitcase by the door. I watched him slip his stainless steel watch higher on his wrist, like he wanted to make sure it caught the light. I kept rocking Noah, pretending not to stare. When he finally kissed Noah's forehead, he barely lingered. He kissed me too, lightly, like an obligation, then checked his phone again. His screen lit up with a notification he tried to hide with his thumb, but I still saw a glimpse of a name I didn't recognize. He muttered something about traffic, grabbed the handle of his suitcase, and hurried toward the door. My heart pounded harder when a folded printout fell from his jacket pocket. I bent down and picked it up before he noticed. It wasn't a Chicago flight. It wasn't even close. It was a reservation for Miami. And not just Miami. A luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton. The kind of place Scott always said was for people who didn't have to think twice. I didn't confront him. I didn't breathe a word. I simply slipped the paper inside Noah's baby blanket while Scott rushed out the door. When it clicked shut, the silence hit me like a wave. I put Noah down gently, walked to the window, and watched Scott climb into a rideshare, the taillights glowing red against the wet street. I waited until the car disappeared, until the glass fogged with my own breath. Then I unfolded the reservation again under the kitchen light, my hands trembling. The dates matched his supposed business trip. The room was booked for 2, and the credit card used wasn't one I had ever seen. My throat tightened, my chest ached, but beneath all of that, something colder settled inside me. It wasn't panic, it wasn't denial. It was a quiet, steady certainty that whatever Scott had built, whatever image he tried to maintain, was about to crumble. I didn't know the full truth yet. I didn't know how deep the lies went. But I knew this. Tonight was the beginning of the end. And the first crack had already appeared, right there in my shaking hands. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the room pressing in, realizing this was no small misstep, but the first clue of a much darker truth. A chill crawled up my spine as I sensed that the lie on that page was only the doorway to something worse waiting beneath the surface. But what I discovered next shattered everything even deeper. The next morning started like any other, with the soft rustle of Noah waking up in his crib and the pale winter light slipping through the blinds. I moved through the motions, warming his bottle, changing him, humming a quiet tune, trying to steady the shaking in my hands from the night before. But every time my mind circled back to that Miami reservation, a cold tremor rolled through me. Scott had lied. That much was clear. But I didn't know yet whether he had lied a little, or lied about everything. After feeding Noah, I settled him into his bouncer seat and picked up my phone, more out of habit than anything else. I opened Instagram without thinking. The usual things popped up. Recipes, baby tips, neighbors posting photos of their dogs. Then suddenly, a video flashed across my screen, one that made my breath stick in my chest. It was a boomerang clip from one of Scott's coworkers, someone I'd met twice at office parties. She was filming a sparkling toast at a rooftop bar. 4 champagne glasses clinked in the frame. I was about to scroll past when I froze. There, unmistakably, was the stainless steel watch I had seen on Scott's wrist the night before. The one he always polished like it was a badge of honor. And next to his hand, too close, much too close, was a woman's manicured fingers, painted a shade of deep red I had never worn. I tapped the screen. The location tag said, Ritz-Carlton, South Beach. My mouth went dry. The Miami reservation had been a truth hiding inside a lie, and now this video was a truth hiding in plain sight. I pressed on the coworker's profile, scanning her recent stories. The next clip hit harder than the first. It was a group photo, taken in dim club lighting. The image was fast, shaky, careless, yet perfectly clear enough. Scott was there, arm draped around a woman I recognized instantly. Chloe, the young marketing assistant from his firm. The one he once called a kid fresh out of college. But there she was, smiling into the camera with her head tilted against his shoulder, like she belonged there. My whole body felt like it had been unplugged. I sat down on the rug before my knees buckled. The condo around me blurred at the edges, my heart thudding too loudly. The part that stung wasn't the affair itself, though that was enough to break me. It was the realization that while I was home rocking our child to sleep, worrying about bills, rationing groceries, Scott was clinking glasses under golden lights in Miami. I glanced around the room. On the dining table lay a stack of unpaid bills, electricity, gas, a hospital invoice from Noah's last checkup. Behind them sat my nearly empty wallet. Scott had told me for months to be smarter with money, that things were tight, that we need to cut back. Meanwhile, he was buying champagne at a hotel we could never afford in our real life. A hot, salty sting filled my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not yet. Not for a man who left his family behind for beachfront hotel rooms and rooftop bars. Instead, I picked up my old wireless printer from the shelf and plugged it in. The machine whirred to life with a tired groan. I took screenshots of everything. Every frame of the videos, every angle of his watch, every picture with Chloe. Then I printed them one by one. The paper slid out warm, heavy, undeniable. I tucked the stack into a manila folder and hid it under Noah's birth certificate in the hallway drawer. I didn't know what I would do with them yet, but I knew I would need them. As I closed the drawer, a cold, clear certainty settled into my bones. Scott thought he was untouchable, but he had no idea what else I was about to discover, and the next truth waiting for me was far darker than a simple affair. That night, after putting Noah to sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table with my old MacBook Air, glowing like a single lighthouse in a dark sea. The Miami screenshots were still sitting heavy in the manila folder, but something inside me whispered that the affair was only the surface. Scott didn't just cheat emotionally. Something about his behavior, his tension, his bursts of irritation suggested a larger mess hiding behind that polished exterior he loved so much. I opened our joint bank account, expecting to see the usual small balances. Instead, my breath caught. Several credit cards were nearly maxed out, with payments overdue by weeks. Charges from luxury hotels and expensive restaurants lined the recent activity page. There were late-night charges from Fifth Avenue boutiques I had never stepped into. There were Uber receipts from addresses I didn't recognize. And worst of all, I saw that the payment for Noah's health insurance had been marked terminated. My heart pounded, a hot mix of fear and anger crawling up my spine. I clicked deeper through statements, tracing transactions back months. Then something even stranger appeared, a loan approved in my name from a lender I'd never heard of. The amount was massive, sitting like a dark bruise against the page. I felt the blood drain from my face. Scott had used my identity. I whispered, "Oh my God," as my fingers shook. I searched for emails, any sign of authorization. Nothing. No warnings, no confirmations. Just a debt I never signed for. Noah stirred in the next room, and I pressed a hand to my chest when I heard his soft cry. His tiny voice grounded me. I walked to his crib, soothed him, and stood there in the low light, realizing that the man I married, weighing down our finances, risking our home, risking our son's safety, was someone I didn't know at all. When he told me not to worry about bills, not to look too closely at our accounts, he wasn't protecting me. He was hiding everything. I returned to the kitchen, opened a blank digital notebook, and began documenting every transaction, every charge, every lie. I wrote until the fear in my chest turned into something colder. Then, as I scrolled back through the bank portal, I noticed a pattern. Certain transfers, spaced oddly, labeled with initials I didn't recognize. I Googled the source. It led to a high-risk lending company known for aggressive collection methods. A chill swept through me. This wasn't just debt. This was danger, and Scott had dragged my name into it. My phone buzzed suddenly. A text from an unknown number read, "Reminder, Payment due. Contact immediately. I stared at it, numb. Scott had gambled with my future. I closed my laptop, holding the edges tight as if steadying myself. I knew the affair was real. But now I saw the deeper truth. Scott wasn't just unfaithful, he was reckless in ways that could ruin us. And the next step I took would determine whether I sank with him or escaped while I still could. That realization forced me to sit completely still, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant traffic outside. I felt the strange calm that comes right before a storm, the kind that tells you life is about to snap in two. I wasn't angry anymore. I was alert, awake in a way I hadn't been in years. Somewhere deep inside, an instinct was rising, telling me to keep digging, despite it. But then I discovered the person who helped him hide it all. And that twist hit even harder. The next morning, I was still shaken from what I'd uncovered. My head throbbed, and my eyes felt heavy from lack of sleep. But the fear pressing against my ribs wouldn't let me rest. I tried to focus on feeding Noah, brushing my hair, pretending to be a normal mother in a normal home. But every time I blinked, I saw that fraudulent loan, those mysterious transfers, and the luxury charges Scott swore he couldn't afford. Around mid-morning, someone knocked on the condo door. 3 sharp taps. I froze. Bill collectors? A neighbor? My heartbeat quickened. I opened it just a crack, and there stood Mark, Scott's longtime coworker and friend. He looked polished as always, wearing a fitted charcoal coat and holding 2 coffees like he had just strolled out of a boardroom. "Hey, Emily," he said smoothly, smiling as if this were a casual visit. "Scott asked me to drop something off." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I'd always found Mark charming in an artificial way, but Scott insisted he was one of the good ones. Today, though, there was a sharpness in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. I opened the door wider. "He's not here." "I know," Mark said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, placing the coffees on the counter. "Thought I'd check on you. You sounded tense on the phone the other day." I frowned. "We didn't talk on the phone." Mark paused, then laughed lightly as if covering something. Right. Must have been someone else. Busy week." I stiffened. Something was wrong. He scanned the condo with a slow, curious gaze, like he was trying to see if anything was missing or packed. He finally sat down at the kitchen island and leaned forward. "Look, Emily, I'm gonna be honest. Scott's been under pressure. A lot of pressure." I crossed my arms. "From who?" His lips pressed into a thin line. "People you don't want to meet." My breath hitched. Was this a threat? A warning? Mark continued. "Scott's been trying to keep up. House, car, image, clients. And well, sometimes he makes desperate moves. We all do. But he's not a bad guy." A laugh slipped out of me, humorless and sharp. "Maxed out cards, canceled insurance, secret loans in my name? That's not pressure. That's betrayal." Mark blinked, surprised I knew. Then he smiled, slow, unsettling. "You're smarter than he gives you credit for." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I felt a rush of heat in my face. "Did you help him do it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Noah in his high chair, babbling softly. Then he spoke in a lower voice. "Sometimes friends help each other survive." That told me everything. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "What did Scott tell you?" Mark's jaw tightened. "That he needed money fast, that you'd never find out, and that Chloe was just a distraction." A shudder went through me. Not because of the affair, but because Scott had planned his lies with someone else's help. Mark rose from the stool and walked toward me. "Emily, listen. You're a good woman, but you need to be careful. Scott's mess? It's bigger than you think. Bigger than an affair." I held my ground. "How big?" He exhaled slowly, then said something that made my heart thump painfully. "He owes people who don't care about families, and if he can't pay, they come looking." Ice spread through my chest. "So you're telling me to protect myself?" He looked at me with surprising softness. "I'm telling you to wake up before everything collapses." Then he picked up his coat, gave Noah a strange, lingering look, and walked out the door without another word. The silence he left behind felt suffocating. For the first time, I realized Scott's lies weren't just painful, they were dangerous. And what happened that same afternoon proved Mark was telling the truth in the worst possible way. After Mark left, the condo felt colder, heavier, as if his presence had left behind a film of dread on the walls. Noah napped in his crib, and I sat on the couch staring at the door he'd walked through. His warning replayed in my mind. He owes people who don't care about families. Every word echoed like it came from inside a tunnel. I told myself he was exaggerating, maybe trying to scare me, maybe trying to protect Scott. But deep down, something in me knew Mark wasn't lying. There had been too many strange nights, too many unexplained purchases, too many times Scott brushed me off with a rehearsed smile and a pat on the shoulder. Still, nothing, not even Mark's eerie visit, prepared me for the message that arrived later that afternoon. It started as a soft ping on my laptop. I almost ignored it, thinking it was junk mail or a coupon from a store I'd visited once. But when I glanced at the sender, my breath caught. Linda Kay, former senior accountant, Hartwell and Pierce Law. Scott's firm. For a moment I didn't move. My hands hovered above the keyboard, unsure whether opening the email would fix something or destroy the last illusion I had left. Finally, I clicked. The email began politely, almost too politely. Hi Emily, you don't know me well. I used to work with your husband. I'm reaching out because I believe you need to know the truth before things get worse. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I read on. I was let go from the firm 2 months ago. Officially, they said it was department restructuring. Unofficially, I was dismissed because I questioned irregularities in certain financial reports connected to Scott. Irregularities. My fingers went numb. He shifted numbers, hid receipts, manipulated expense categories. I warned him multiple times, quietly, but he told me it was handled. I believed him until I realized he was funneling certain transactions through personal accounts, and one of the names tied to those accounts was yours. I gasped. My legal name, my birth date, linked to transactions I had never approved. Linda continued. I didn't want to get involved in personal matters, but I overheard conversations. He's not just in debt. He's in danger of being investigated, and from what I saw, he's been setting things up so that if anything collapses, it lands on you. Please be careful, and please keep this email confidential. She signed it simply. Linda, I sat there, stunned, staring at the screen until tears blurred the words. Not the hot, angry tears from discovering Miami. No, I cried because this was something deeper, more violating. Scott had used me as a shield, used my name, used my future, and never once looked me in the eye while doing it. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingertips into my temples. I needed clarity. I needed air. But mostly, I needed to protect Noah. I grabbed my phone and walked out onto the small balcony overlooking the gray Manhattan skyline across the river. Cars moved like tiny beads of light. Sirens wailed in the distance. People lived their lives unaware of my world crumbling. My phone buzzed again. A new email from Linda. Just one line. Check the attached file. It's the one they don't know I kept. My pulse jumped. I opened the attachment. A spreadsheet loaded, rows and rows of transactions, dates, names, notes. And there, unmistakably, were multiple payments labeled under an account Scott had created using my identity. Not just loans, transfers, withdrawals, signatures that weren't mine. Then I saw something that made my breath freeze completely. A note next to a large sum withdrawn from the firm's secondary expense account, handled by MT, Mark Taylor. Mark, his friend, his shadow. The truth crashed over me all at once. Scott wasn't spiraling alone. He wasn't unlucky. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was working with someone who had already warned me to wake up. And suddenly, I realized why Mark had shown up unannounced. He wasn't just checking in, he was checking how much I knew. But what arrived at my door the very next day proved that neither man had any idea how quickly their web of lies was about to unravel. The next evening felt unnervingly still. Noah fell asleep early, worn out from teething, and I finally had a moment to sit alone on the couch. But instead of peace, a tight pressure sat in my chest. I kept replaying Linda's emails, Mark's warning, and the spreadsheet full of forged signatures. Every piece fit together too perfectly and too dangerously. Scott wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just lying. He was building an escape route for himself and leaving me as the fallout target. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A call from Scott. I didn't want to pick up, but if I ignored him, he'd get suspicious. I let it ring once more before answering. Hey, I said softly. His voice came through the line, loud and upbeat, like he was trying too hard. Just checking on you and Noah. You okay? You sound tired. I'm fine, I lied. Long day. He started rambling about work, clients, Meetings, numbers, none of it making sense. His words slurred slightly, the way they did when he'd had 2 or 3 drinks. I quietly put him on speaker and set the phone beside me. He didn't notice. He never noticed much anymore. I got up to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. When I returned, I realized something. Scott wasn't talking anymore. Someone else was. A woman's voice. Soft, light, annoyed. "Are you seriously calling her right now?" she snapped. "You said you were done with this." "Chloe." My spine stiffened. I stayed silent, holding my breath. Scott whispered harshly, "Relax. I'm just keeping things smooth." "Smooth?" Chloe hissed. "Mark said the money was supposed to be transferred today. You promised him. You promised me." My eyes widened. I sank to the sofa, clutching the edge of a pillow. Scott groaned. "I told you, it's coming. Emily won't look into it. She never does. She trusts me." My blood ran cold. Chloe scoffed. "You're delusional. She looked right through me last time I saw her. She's not stupid, and if she finds out about Miami—" "She won't," Scott snapped louder than before. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Chloe's tone turned sharp. "This is spiraling, Scott. Mark is getting nervous. He said if the collectors show up again, he's done covering for you." "Collectors? Mark covering? Money owed." Pieces snapped together with brutal clarity. Chloe lowered her voice. "You need to get your wife under control before she ruins everything." My heart slammed against my ribcage. Scott muttered something I couldn't hear. Then a door slammed in the background. Chloe must have walked away. I heard muffled footsteps, the creak of a bed, and Scott sighing deeply. He thought he was alone again. He thought no one heard. He thought I was still the woman who trusted him blindly. Then, as if the universe wanted to hammer the truth deeper, Chloe's voice returned, farther away but still clear. "I'm telling you, Scott, if she finds out you used her information for those loans, she will bury you alive." I froze. He didn't deny it. He didn't even hesitate. He simply said, "Then she better not find out." The air in the room felt thin. My stomach twisted so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I ended the call without a word, terrified he'd hear my breathing and realize I'd heard everything. I sat in the dark for a long time, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers went numb. Every lie he'd told, every promise, every apology, all of it suddenly made sense. He didn't just betray me, he gambled with my name, my future, our child's future, and Chloe, his affair partner, knew more about my financial life than I did. I wiped my eyes, stood up slowly, and walked to the hallway mirror. My reflection looked unfamiliar, like someone older, someone cracked open. But underneath the tired face, there was something new emerging. Resolve. If Scott wanted to keep me under control, he was already too late. Because after what I heard tonight, I would never be silent again. And the very next morning, someone arrived at my door with information that turned suspicion into undeniable proof. The next morning, I was still rattled from the call I had overheard. My hands felt unsteady pouring cereal into a bowl, and every sound in the condo startled me. Noah babbled happily in his high chair, unaware of the storm building around us. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting Scott to come barging in, half expecting one of those collectors Chloe mentioned to knock instead. The slightest creak made my heart race. I had barely slept, replaying their words again and again. Used her information, keep her under control. Mark is nervous. Nothing about my husband's world felt familiar anymore. I tried to breathe slowly, to steady myself, but fear kept tightening around my ribs until the doorbell rang and nearly made me drop the bowl in my hands. I froze. The bell rang again, firm, deliberate, no hesitation. I scooped Noah into my arms and walked to the door with slow steps. When I checked the peephole, my breath caught. It was Linda, the former accountant who had emailed me. She looked even more nervous in person, clutching a plain black laptop bag to her chest. I opened the door only halfway. She whispered, "Can I come in? I shouldn't be seen out here." Her tone made my stomach twist. I stepped aside, locking the door immediately. She set the bag on the kitchen table and looked around as if expecting someone to jump out. "I know you must be confused," she said softly, "but you need to hear this before things get worse." My hands trembled as I set Noah in his playpen. "What is it?" I asked. Linda didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out a small silver flash drive. "This," she said, "is the file Mark accidentally forwarded to me at 2 in the morning. He meant to send it to Scott, but something glitched. He never realized I saw it. A chill ran up my spine. Linda took a deep breath and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A single audio file appeared on the screen. She hit play. Mark's voice filled the room instantly. Calm, arrogant, unsettlingly casual. "You need to calm down," he said to someone. "As long as Emily stays in the dark, you're safe. But if she starts asking questions, then you better have a backup plan. The firm won't take the fall for you, and neither will I." I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. Then Scott's voice came through. Strained, angry, barely recognizable. "I'm handling her. She won't dig. She can't afford to. And even if she does, everything points to her name, not mine." My vision blurred. Linda whispered, "There's more." She skipped ahead. "Mark again. If the investigators come, you blame her. Say she opened the accounts. Say she forged it. She's a stay-at-home mom. They'll believe you before they believe her." My breath shattered in my chest. The recording ended with Scott laughing, a low, vicious sound I had never heard from him before. I stared at the laptop as if it had set fire to the table. Linda placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You need to leave him before he ruins your life. He will drag you down with him, and he won't hesitate." I nodded, unable to speak. Tears blurred my eyes, but they weren't from heartbreak anymore. They were from clarity. Everything I feared was true. Everything I doubted was confirmed. Scott wasn't planning to save himself. He was planning to sacrifice me. I lifted Noah into my arms and held him close, feeling his small heartbeat against mine. For the first time, the fear inside me hardened into something sharp, solid, unbreakable. I whispered, "He won't get the chance." Because now I had proof, real, undeniable proof, and I finally understood what I had to do next. But hours later, an unexpected betrayal revealed that Mark wasn't the only one hiding secrets, and the next truth hit even harder. All afternoon, I walked around the condo as if the floor were made of glass. Every light felt too bright, every sound too sharp. Linda's recording kept replaying in my mind, each sentence carving a deeper wound. "Blame her. She's a stay-at-home mom. They'll believe you." I wasn't safe. Not emotionally, not financially, not legally. And the more I replayed Scott's voice on that recording, the more I realized he had never seen me as a partner. He saw me as a shield, a tool, a name he could sacrifice. By late afternoon, I had packed 2 diaper bags and a small suitcase with Noah's essentials, just in case. I didn't have a full plan yet, but my instinct kept screaming, "Be ready." I had just zipped the suitcase shut when the doorbell rang again. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Collectors? Scott?" I moved quietly to the peephole and looked out and nearly lost my balance. Chloe, her red coat, her perfect hair, her sunglasses pushed up like she owned the hallway. She didn't look nervous. She looked irritated, impatient, like I was late for an appointment I didn't know existed. I hesitated, then opened the door a few inches. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Chloe didn't smile. She didn't even pretend. She slipped inside as if she'd been here before, scanning the condo with a sharp, dismissive expression. "We need to talk," she said, voice clipped. Noah, playing with a toy truck on the floor, babbled at her. She barely glanced at him. I stepped between them instinctively. "Say whatever you came to say and leave." Chloe crossed her arms. "Fine. I'm here because things are getting messy, and I don't like messy." My eyebrows knitted together. "Messy?" She sighed dramatically, as if I were inconveniencing her. "Scott is losing it. He's not paying who he needs to pay, and Mark is acting like a paranoid control freak." I swallowed hard. "And why is that my problem?" She rolled her eyes. "You think I want to be involved in their drama? I just wanted a fun escape. But now Scott is saying you're getting suspicious. And when you get suspicious, Mark gets nervous. And when Mark gets nervous, he does stupid things." My pulse quickened. "Stupid things like what?" Chloe hesitated. Then she said something I will never forget. "Like planning to move the remaining debt under your name." The room went silent. My ears rang. My hands shook so violently I had to steady myself on the counter. She lifted a shoulder casually. "Look, I didn't sign up for this. Scott told me you never check accounts. He said you're too busy with the baby. But Mark said if investigators start digging, you're the perfect scapegoat. Clean record. No career in finance, easy to blame, easy to crush." My breath left me in a single cold rush. "Why are you telling me this?" Chloe finally looked uneasy. "Because I'm not going down with them," she said. "They're in too deep. If anyone gets caught, they'll turn on each other, and then on whoever's closest. And trust me, you're closer than you think. I stepped toward her, anger rising like heat from the floor. So what? You came here to clear your conscience? She didn't flinch. No, I came here because Mark asked me to keep an eye on you. Then she smirked, a slow, cutting smirk. But now I see you're not as clueless as they thought. My stomach twisted. She grabbed her purse. Fix your situation before they fix it for you. Then she opened the door and left without looking back. I stood frozen. Noah's tiny truck buzzing on the floor, the rain tapping lightly against the window. Chloe's words curled around me like smoke. Move the debt under your name. You're the perfect scapegoat. Fix it before they fix you. My throat tightened painfully. This wasn't betrayal anymore. This was war. And the next move I made would decide whether I escaped alive or got buried under the lies they built around me. After Chloe walked out, the condo felt like it was shrinking around me, walls tightening as if they knew something terrible was coming. I sank onto the edge of the couch, holding Noah in my lap, feeling his warm weight steady my shaking hands. My ears still echoed with Chloe's warning. Fix your situation before they fix it for you. The words had an aftertaste of danger, like smoke left in the air long after a fire has burned out. I knew then, truly knew, that if I didn't move fast, I would end up with every debt, every forged signature, every fabricated lie stacked against my name. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Each second felt like a push forward, telling me to act. I stood up slowly, kissed Noah's head, and whispered, "We're leaving." Saying it out loud steadied me. It made everything real. I walked into the bedroom, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and opened it on the bed. The zipper sounded like the starting gun of a race I never asked to run. I began packing carefully, quietly, choosing only what mattered. Noah's clothes, his blanket, a few bottles, diapers, wipes, the little stuffed bear Kate had mailed us last Christmas. For myself, I packed jeans, comfortable sweaters, and the documents Linda had helped me print. Each item felt like a piece of a life I was preparing to carry into something unknown. I avoided anything that would draw Scott's attention. Nothing fancy, nothing excessive, just necessities. Then I opened the hallway cabinet and pulled out the metal lockbox where we kept birth certificates, passports, and old tax returns. My pulse raced as I opened it. All the documents were still there. Noah's passport, my birth certificate. I slipped them into a folder and placed it inside the diaper bag where Scott would never think to look. Next, I took the flash drive with the recording and tucked it into an inner zipper in my purse. Evidence, protection, survival. Suddenly, the front door handle rattled. I froze. My breath caught painfully in my chest. Noah stirred in my arms, sensing my tension. I pressed a hand over his back, whispering, "Shh." The handle rattled again, then stopped. Silence. I waited, listening to my heart pound. After a long minute, footsteps faded down the hallway. I peeked through the peephole. A delivery person was sliding a package into the neighbor's alcove. My knees weakened with relief. That moment told me everything. If someone could rattle my door and make my heart stop, then I no longer belonged here. I moved faster. I scanned the living room for things Scott might consider suspicious. Missing electronics, empty drawers, moved boxes. Everything looked normal. Everything looked lived in. I placed toys where they usually sat, smoothed the throw blanket across the couch, even left my coffee mug on the counter so it looked like I'd simply stepped out of the room. The only sign of a plan was the packed suitcase under the crib, hidden behind a pile of folded blankets. By evening, the sky outside turned a deep, bruised gray. I texted my sister, "Kate, it's time. I need a way out," she replied within seconds. "Say when." "I'll cover everything." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from fear, but from gratitude so sharp it almost hurt. Then the door buzzed again, this time just a soft knock, but enough to tighten every muscle in my body. I walked to the door cautiously and checked the peephole. Mark, standing there, expression unreadable, heart sinking. I stepped back, pulse hammering. Mark knocked again, harder this time. "Emily," he called, voice low, "we need to talk." No, we didn't. Not now. Not ever. Not when my entire future was packed into a suitcase he couldn't see. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the door as he waited, listening. After a long, tense moment, he exhaled sharply and walked away. But something in his tone, controlled, calculated, told me he wasn't leaving for good. He'd be back, and he'd be watching. I looked down at Noah, then at the packed suitcase. There was no turning back now, because the next move, my escape, had to happen before Mark or Scott made theirs. By the next morning, every instinct inside me had shifted from fear to strategy. I woke before sunrise, sitting up in bed with Noah curled against my arm, his tiny breaths brushing my skin. I watched the soft light spill into the room and realized something simple but powerful. This was the last morning I would ever spend in this condo, as the woman Scott believed he controlled. Today wasn't about running. It was about reclaiming my life before he destroyed it. As soon as Noah drifted back to sleep, I slipped out of bed, grabbed my MacBook Air from the drawer, and sat at the small kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual as I opened a private browsing window. My hands trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the finality of what I was about to do. First, a one-way flight to Ohio. That was my alibi. A believable, harmless trip to see my mother, something Scott would never question. I used the joint travel miles he insisted I never touch. 2 seats, 1 adult, 1 infant. Cheap, familiar, ordinary, completely unthreatening. Then came the second part of the plan, the real escape. I typed, Chicago to Zurich one way. My heart hammered as I pressed search. The prices glowed on the screen, heavy and unforgiving. Switzerland was expensive, painfully expensive. Scott had always mocked people who traveled there, calling it the country for people who wiped their tears with money. I stared at the total cost and did the math 3 times. It would drain most of what I had in my tiny personal savings account, the one I had protected for years, the one he didn't know still existed. But safety costs something, freedom costs something, and I would pay it 100 times over if it meant Noah never had to grow up in the shadow of Scott's lies. I typed in our names, mine, Noah's. I entered the passport numbers. When I reached the payment page, my hand hesitated just a moment. Not out of fear, out of awe. Awe that after all the ways Scott tried to trap me, financially, emotionally, legally, I still had one door left open. I entered the card number from my private account. I hit confirm. For a moment, the spinning circle on the screen felt like the entire world holding its breath. Then the confirmation page appeared, clean and clear, like a window opening. Reservation complete. I exhaled shakily, covering my mouth to keep from crying out. It was real. It was done. We were leaving. I forwarded the tickets to Kate, adding, "Keep these safe. I might need backup copies." She replied instantly, "You're doing the right thing. I'm waiting for you." Just as I closed the laptop, the condo door beeped, Scott unlocking it. My spine snapped straight. I shoved the laptop back into the drawer, slipped the printed Ohio tickets onto the counter, and scooped Noah into my arms just as Scott stepped in, smelling faintly of cologne and ego. "Morning," he said casually, setting his overpriced briefcase on the counter. I forced a smile. "I was thinking, maybe I'll take Noah to Ohio for a few days. Mom's been asking to see him." Scott didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, sure. Use the joint card." "I used miles," I replied softly. "Great, whatever," he mumbled, already distracted. He didn't notice the tremor in my voice. He didn't notice the packed suitcase hidden behind the crib. He didn't notice the woman standing in front of him wasn't scared anymore. When he finally left for work, shutting the door behind him, I inhaled deeply, so deeply it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. I walked to the kitchen table, picked up the printed Zurich confirmation from the hidden folder, and held it for a moment. This was my lifeline, my proof, my quiet rebellion. And what happened next, at the airport, would push everything into motion faster than I ever imagined. The weekend before my planned departure felt unreal, like living inside a movie where everyone else knew their lines except me. I moved through the condo with quiet precision, performing the role of a calm wife while the truth burned beneath my skin. If Scott noticed anything strange, he didn't mention it. Maybe he was too wrapped up in his lies. Or maybe he believed so deeply that he owned my silence that he couldn't imagine me preparing to leave him. Saturday morning started the way he liked it. Coffee brewing, sports highlights on TV, Noah gurgling on his blanket. Scott lounged on the couch in sweatpants, scrolling through his phone like a king surveying his kingdom. I watched him from the kitchen, studying the ease in his posture. It was painfully clear he didn't suspect a thing. In some twisted way, that comforted me. The more he relaxed, the more room I had to maneuver. If he had even an ounce of awareness, he would have noticed how differently I looked at him. Not with love, not with anger, but with the cold clarity of a woman who has seen behind the curtain and found only rot. Around noon, he suggested we order lunch. He waved his iPhone lazily and said, "Get something nice, you deserve it." The hypocrisy nearly made me choke. I nodded, pretending to browse options. As he turned back to the game, I quietly slipped into the bedroom and checked the suitcase hidden behind Noah's crib. Still untouched, still safe. When I came back, Scott didn't even ask where I'd been. That afternoon, he grew restless. "I gotta step out for a bit," he said, already grabbing his jacket. "Mark wants to go over some paperwork." His tone was too casual, too light. Any other weekend, I might have believed him. But now, knowing the truth, I followed him to the window and watched as he hurried into the elevator with urgency that had nothing to do with paperwork. I didn't care where he went. I only cared that he was gone long enough for me to prepare the next piece of my escape. While he was out, I packed a smaller bag, one I could grab quickly if something went wrong. Inside, Noah's passport, the flash drive, the emergency cash Linda advised me to withdraw, and the printed Zurich tickets folded between 2 diapers. I hid the bag under the stroller, tucked so far behind the seat that no one would notice, unless they knew to look. When Scott returned, smelling like expensive whiskey and someone else's perfume, I didn't ask questions. He didn't volunteer answers. We slipped back into the roles we had long perfected. Him pretending to be a tired husband doing his best, me pretending to believe him. Sunday morning was colder. Dark clouds hung over the skyline like a warning. Scott made pancakes, burnt on the edges the way he always made them, and hummed an off-key tune while flipping them. I forced myself to eat, to smile, to nod at his stories. But inside, I was ticking down the hours, counting the breaths until freedom. In the afternoon, I watched him playing with Noah on the floor. For a brief second, a memory washed over me, how hopeful I'd once felt when we first brought our baby home. I wondered if some tiny part of that man still existed inside him. But then he grabbed his phone, smirked at a message, and the illusion shattered like thin glass. By evening, he announced he was heading out again. "Just for an hour," he said. He didn't look back as he closed the door. I watched him depart, the empty hallway swallowing him whole. Something about that moment chilled me. It felt symbolic, like the universe drawing a line between who he was and who I was about to become. As the elevator doors shut, I whispered to Noah, "That's the last weekend we ever wait for him." And deep down, I knew it was true. Because the next morning, everything, every lie, every plan, every secret, would collide at the airport in a way none of us expected. Monday morning arrived wrapped in a thin chill, the kind that makes the air feel sharper, clearer, like the world itself was paying attention. I woke before the sun, lying still for a moment, listening to Noah's soft breathing in the crib beside me. Today was the day. Every step, every detail, every silent plan I had carried had come down to this one morning. If anything slipped, if Scott sensed even a hint of what I was about to do, everything would collapse. I couldn't afford a single mistake. I dressed Noah in soft layers and tucked his tiny socks into his shoes while whispering, "We're almost free." He smiled drowsily, unaware of the storm we were escaping. I packed the diaper bag, passport, Zurich tickets wedged between diapers, the flash drive of evidence, the emergency cash, and Noah's bottle. My suitcase was positioned by the hallway, disguised as laundry to take downstairs. Everything felt fragile, as if one wrong movement might break the illusion. At 7:12 a.m., Scott emerged from the bedroom rubbing his eyes, hair messy, shirt untucked. The perfect picture of a man who'd stayed out too late doing things he shouldn't. He yawned dramatically and reached for his phone. "Ready for Ohio?" he asked, voice thick with disinterest. "Yes," I answered, tone deliberately soft, almost apologetic. "Mom really needs help right now. I'd feel better being there for a few days." He nodded, scrolling through his notifications. Yeah, that's fine. Just text me when you land." I watched him carefully. This was the moment he could have noticed something. The tension in my shoulders, the packed stroller, the strange calm in my voice. But he didn't. He was too absorbed in whatever message Chloe or Mark had sent overnight. His world had shifted so far from mine that he barely looked at me anymore. I handed him Noah so I could tie my shoes. He bounced our son once, awkwardly, as if the weight of his own child felt unfamiliar in his arms. Then he kissed Noah's cheek, handed him back, and grabbed his briefcase. "Okay, I've got an early meeting," he said. "You two be safe." Safe. The irony almost made me laugh. He left the condo, letting the door swing shut behind him without a backward glance. I stood still until I heard the elevator descend. Then I moved, fast. I grabbed the suitcase, the diaper bag, the stroller. I checked that the passports were still where I'd hidden them. I double-checked the Zurich itinerary, and then I stepped out into the hallway, locking the condo behind me for the last time. My hands shook slightly, but my spine felt straighter than it had in months. The cab arrived 5 minutes later. The driver loaded the suitcase into the trunk while I strapped Noah into his seat. As we pulled away, I looked up at the building's tall windows. Behind one of them was the life I was shedding like old skin, a life built on lies I didn't create. At the airport, the check-in line for the Ohio flight was long but comforting. Ordinary families, business travelers, grandparents carrying gifts. No one looked twice at me. No one suspected that a woman traveling with her baby was quietly escaping a web of deceit that could have destroyed her. I checked in, collected the boarding passes, and snapped a photo of Noah smiling at a passing flight attendant. I sent it to Scott with the caption, "We're here, boarding soon." He responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Then I walked, calmly, deliberately, not toward the Ohio gate, but toward the connecting flight desk. My heart pounded louder with each step. I handed over my Zurich confirmation, my passport, Noah's passport. The agent smiled. "You're all set. Boarding in 1 hour." I exhaled, knees weakening with relief. We found a quiet corner near the window. Outside, planes glided across the tarmac, their wings cutting the sky. Noah pressed his hands to the glass, fascinated by the movement. I kissed the back of his head. "We did it," I whispered. But just as I allowed myself that tiny breath of victory, my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. "Scott, why did I just get a fraud alert with your name on it?" My fingers tightened around the phone the moment I saw Scott's message. "Why did I just get a fraud alert with your name on it?" The words glowed on the screen, sharp enough to cut. A strange ringing filled my ears, and for a moment, the world around me blurred. The airport announcements, the rolling suitcases, Noah babbling as he pressed his palms to the window. Everything narrowed to that single message. The timing was impossible, or maybe it was predictable. Scott's lies were finally catching up, and the mess he created was spilling over. Maybe a lender flagged one of his forged accounts. Maybe Mark forgot to cover a trail. Maybe Chloe slipped. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Scott was panicking, and panicking men look for control. I forced my hands to stop trembling long enough to type, "I'm about to board. What are you talking about?" I needed to sound confused, harmless, in character. His reply came within seconds. "Bank just called. They said there was an attempted withdrawal on one of your accounts, the one you opened last month." "Explain." A cold shiver crawled down my back. I knew exactly which account he meant, one he opened under my identity, one Linda warned me about. I typed slowly, carefully. "I didn't open anything." "Maybe call them back?" "I'm boarding now." I didn't wait for his answer. Instead, I silenced my phone entirely, turned it face down, and tucked it into the diaper bag. The buzzing felt like a threat, like a hand trying to drag me backward. I refused to let it. A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Passengers for a different flight lined up, chattering, laughing, pulling carry-ons. Normal people living normal lives. I adjusted Noah's jacket and held him close. His head rested on my shoulder, warm and trusting. "We're okay," I whispered, though my chest felt tight. "We're going to be okay." I checked the digital board. Zurich, on time. Gate F12. Just then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed a man in a dark jacket step into the terminal. He scanned the area slowly, deliberately, as if looking for someone. I froze. My heartbeat stumbled, then raced. The man wasn't Scott. He wasn't Mark. But something about him, the rigid posture, the intensity, sent alarm bells blaring in my mind. Collectors. Chloe's warning replayed instantly. He owes people who don't care about families. I shifted slightly, turning my back while keeping Noah secure. The man didn't seem to notice me yet. He continued scanning the crowd. My pulse hammered so loudly I could barely hear the terminal noise. Maybe he wasn't here for us. Maybe I was imagining it. But instinct doesn't lie, and mine screamed danger. I needed to move. I grabbed the stroller, placed Noah in gently, and headed toward the family restroom. It was tucked behind a corner, out of the open walkway. The hallway was quieter, the sounds muted. I pushed the stroller inside the restroom, locked the door, and let out a shaky breath. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to steady myself. Leaving wasn't just the right choice, it was the only choice. My phone buzzed again inside the bag, short, insistent vibrations. I didn't want to look, but I forced myself. 3 missed calls from Scott. A new message. "Answer me now. Something's wrong. Where are you?" Followed by another. "Mark said someone tipped off the firm. You didn't, did you?" My stomach twisted. He was spiraling, losing control. And then one more message. "If you're lying to me, I swear." I didn't open the rest. I turned the phone off completely. No more breadcrumbs for him to track. When I stepped out of the restroom, the man in the dark jacket was gone. Relief washed over me, but I didn't slow down. I headed straight for gate F12, weaving through passengers, pushing the stroller with purpose. As I reached the gate, the agent announced pre-boarding for families with young children. Perfect. I approached the counter, handed over our passports and boarding passes, and held my breath while she scanned them. She smiled gently. "You're all set. Enjoy your trip." My knees nearly buckled from relief. I rolled Noah through the jetway, each step shedding a layer of fear. The plane felt like a sanctuary. Dim lights, soft murmurs, the distant rumble of engines warming. I strapped Noah into the bassinet seat. He giggled, tapping the tray with his small hand. "You're so brave," I whispered, brushing his cheek. I sank into my seat, lungs filling with air that felt cleaner than anything I'd breathed in months. Then, just as the flight attendants closed the cabin door, sealing us inside, my phone, now completely off, stayed silent in my bag. From this moment on, Scott couldn't reach me. He couldn't stop me. He couldn't twist the truth or corner me again. And he had no idea that by the time he realized I was gone, everything he built would collapse faster than he could ever imagine. By the time our plane lifted off the runway, slicing through the clouds like a clean break from everything behind us, Scott was just unlocking the condo door back in Jersey City. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture it perfectly. The dim entryway, the faint smell of last night's whiskey on his coat, the quiet that should have comforted him, but instead pressed on his nerves like a weight he couldn't shake off. He kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and called out, "Em, you home?" Nothing. He checked the living room. Empty. Kitchen empty. Bedroom empty. At first he wasn't alarmed. He assumed I had already flown to Ohio. He went to the fridge, pulled out a beer, and collapsed on the couch. He opened his email while sipping lazily, already preparing himself to play the role of the hard-working husband checking on his wife later. But then, his screen froze. New message, fraud alert, suspicious activity detected. He frowned, annoyed, clicking aggressively. The alert popped up again, this time with my name tied to an attempted withdrawal. The same account he forged. The same account he swore Mark handled safely. For a moment, confusion clouded his face. Then irritation, then a flicker of fear. He dialed my number, straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. He slammed the beer down so hard foam spilled over the top. "Damn it, Emily," he muttered. "Pick up the phone." He texted, called again, pacing now, breathing harder. When he finally called the airline to confirm my flight time, the agent told him something that made his world tilt. "Your wife and child boarded a flight earlier today." Yes, I know that," he snapped. "To Ohio." The agent hesitated. "No, sir. The domestic tickets were used as check-in verification. They boarded a connecting international flight." A long, deadly silence. "International," he repeated, voice cracking. "To where?" The agent clicked through the file. "Zurich, Switzerland." The words hit him like a physical blow. He nearly dropped the phone. Zurich, a place he could never afford, a place he mocked, a place completely out of his reach, a place where he had zero control. For the first time in his life, Scott Parker felt small. He hung up without responding. Panic surged up his throat like drowning water. He opened every banking app he had, every account, every card. Overdrawn, frozen, flagged, closed. Mark had stopped covering for him. He called immediately, voicemail. He called again, nothing. He threw his phone onto the couch, pacing wildly as if movement could reverse the truth. His wife was gone. His son was gone. His lies were unraveling. and he couldn't afford a single step required to chase them. He rushed to his computer, typing frantically. Zurich flights, last-minute tickets, credit card options, but every attempt ended the same way. Declined. 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 He tried calling the bank, screaming into the receiver. He called the airline again. He called a third credit card company. He called his firm's financial manager. He called Mark 15 times. Every answer was either automated or non-existent. Scott had built a life that revolved around image. The Rolex, the Mercedes, the tailored suits, the champagne rooftops, the Ritz-Carlton selfies. But when he needed something real, money, trust, loyalty, access, he had nothing left. Reality finally landed its blow. He sat on the living room floor, hands gripping his hair, chest heaving. The condo around him, once a stage for his carefully curated life, now looked barren, cheap, hollow. Because without me, without Noah, without the illusion of control, he had nothing. And then his phone buzzed one last time, a message he didn't expect, from an unknown number. "We need to talk, you owe us, and your friend Mark isn't picking up." Scott froze. Collectors, his breath stuttered. Everything he feared was now at his door. And he didn't know it yet, but the worst was still coming, because his downfall had only just begun. When our plane landed in Zurich early the next morning, the cabin lights glowed soft and golden, as if welcoming us into a world untouched by the chaos we had fled. The moment I stepped onto the jet bridge, cold, crisp air rushed against my face, clean in a way New Jersey air never felt. Noah blinked sleepily in my arms, cheeks pink from the long flight, fingers curled around the collar of my sweater. I whispered, "We made it, baby," more to myself than to him. The airport was quiet, almost serene. No shouting, no rushing crowds. Everything moved with a calm efficiency that felt like a balm after months of living in tension. I followed the signs through the terminal, heart pounding not from fear this time, but from the strange, unfamiliar feeling of safety. Then, as I turned the corner toward baggage claim, I saw her. Kate, my older sister, stood there in a navy coat, hair pulled into a soft bun, eyes already shining with tears. She dropped her tote bag and hurried toward us, arms outstretched. "Oh my God, Em," she breathed, pulling me into a tight hug without disturbing Noah. "You're really here." The dam inside me cracked. My throat tightened, my eyes stung, and I sank into her embrace with a desperate relief I didn't know I'd been holding back. "I didn't know if I'd make it," I whispered. "You did," she said firmly, "and you're safe now." We walked through the terminal together, her hand steady on my shoulder. Noah reached for her hair, and she laughed softly, kissing his forehead. The moment felt unreal, peaceful, ordinary, something I hadn't felt in months. Outside, the air carried the scent of snow and pine. The mountains stretched faintly in the distance, their silhouettes like quiet guardians watching over us. Kate loaded my suitcase into the back of her car while I strapped Noah into the car seat she had already installed. She had prepared for everything. "Let's get you home," she said. Home. The word made my chest ache. Her apartment sat near Lake Zurich, a peaceful place with cobblestone paths, tidy buildings, and warm yellow lights glowing from windows even in the early morning. The guest room had a crib waiting, fresh sheets, soft blankets, a little stuffed lamb on the pillow. I stood there staring at it, overwhelmed by how different this place felt from the cold condo I had just escaped. Later, after a shower so hot it felt like it melted weeks of fear off my skin, I sat with Kate at her kitchen table. She poured me herbal tea, the steam rising like a quiet promise. "Show me everything," she said gently. I pulled out the folder, bank statements, the forged signatures, screenshots, and the flash drive with the recording. She listened without interrupting, jaw tightening as I described each lie, each betrayal, each danger. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "We're gonna fix this," she said. "You're not alone." For the first time in so long, I believed it. That afternoon, we took a slow walk along the lake. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, landing on Noah's hat and making him giggle. I held him close, breathing in the clean air, feeling my shoulders finally loosen. Everything felt possible. But even in this peace, my phone, now turned back on, vibrated non-stop inside my coat pocket. I didn't have the heart to look yet, but I knew the chaos waiting on the screen wasn't going anywhere. Instead, I focused on Noah's laughter, the swans gliding across the lake, and the quiet promise that we were starting something new. Later that evening, After putting Noah to sleep, I finally checked the phone. Dozens of missed calls from Scott, messages growing frantic, then angry, then desperate. But one message, one number stood out from the rest. An unknown sender. A single line. "We need information about Scott Parker. Call immediately." My breath caught. It wasn't Scott. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't a collector. It was from an international investigations unit, and their involvement would turn Scott's world into ashes far quicker than I ever could. I stared at the message for a long moment. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. "We need information about Scott Parker. Call immediately." It wasn't phrased like a threat. It wasn't phrased like a warning. It sounded official, clinical, like someone knocking on a door with a badge hidden under their coat. I showed the message to Kate as she wiped down the kitchen counter after dinner. Her eyes narrowed instantly. "That's not a collector," she said. "That's someone who knows what he's been doing." I swallowed hard. "Should I call?" Kate nodded slowly. "Call, but don't give them everything until you know who they are." My hands trembled slightly as I dialed the number. It rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. "This is Agent Lane with the Financial Crimes Task Unit. Is this Emily Parker?" "Financial crimes." The two words pressed like cold fingers on the back of my neck. "Yes," I whispered. "We received multiple flagged reports related to your husband's financial activity," he continued. "Your name appears attached to several accounts now under investigation. The STIN. We need to determine whether you were knowingly involved." The room felt suddenly smaller. Kate mouthed, "Put it on speaker." I did. "I didn't open those accounts," I said quickly. "I didn't authorize anything. Scott forged my information." "We suspected that," Agent Lane replied. "And your sudden exit from the country raised concerns, though now it appears you left for safety. Are you able to confirm your current location?" Kate shook her head no vigorously. I kept my voice steady. "I'm with family. That's all I can say for now." "That's fine," the agent answered calmly. "Mrs. Parker, your cooperation could protect you and your child. We have reason to believe your husband is part of a fraudulent expense scheme involving others at his firm. One of his associates is already under review." My breath stuttered. "Mark," Agent Lane continued, "we received a tip 2 weeks ago, but we didn't have enough evidence. Now we do, and some of what we have came from internal sources." "Internal sources?" I repeated, pulse quickening. Kate leaned forward. "Ask who?" "Who?" I echoed softly. The agent paused, as if choosing words carefully. "A former accountant from the firm. She forwarded us a data file before she disappeared from our radar. We're trying to locate her." "Linda," my heart squeezed. "She warned me," I whispered. "She came to my home." "That would make sense," he replied. "She was scared. She believed she was being watched." Kate's hand tightened around mine. A chill ran through me. "Is she safe?" "We don't know," the agent said quietly. "But the information she sent is enough to trigger a federal investigation." My thoughts spiraled. Had Linda risked everything to help me? Had Mark realized she slipped? Did she flee? Was she okay? "Mrs. Parker," the agent said, voice steady, "did you yourself provide any information to Scott's firm or to outside parties?" "No," I said, louder this time. "I left because I was in danger. I left because my husband was using my identity to cover his crimes." There was no hesitation in Agent Lane's response. "If that's true, we will protect you." And for the first time, I felt the truth settling over me like a warm blanket. The law wasn't coming after me. They were coming after him. After the call ended, Kate rubbed her forehead. This is bigger than we thought." I nodded slowly, still absorbing everything. "Scott's going to spiral when he realizes investigators are involved." "Let him," Kate said. "It's the consequences of what he did." Later that night, after putting Noah to sleep, I finally checked my phone again. More messages, more missed calls, but one voicemail stood out. 30 seconds long. I hesitated, then pressed play. Scott's voice filled the room, but it wasn't angry, it wasn't cocky, it was shaking. "Emily, please. They came to the office, they're asking questions. Mark isn't answering. Chloe's gone. I need you to call me back. Please, I need you." I ended the voicemail mid-sentence, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something crystal clear. His collapse wasn't my responsibility. And the next step, the one he never saw coming, would seal the cracks in his life for good. Because the investigation wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next few days in Zurich unfolded with a strange mixture of peace and tension. Peace because Noah slept better than he had in months. Tension because every sunrise brought a new ripple from the disaster unraveling back in New Jersey. I tried to keep things gentle and calm for Noah. Walks by the lake, warm meals with Kate, quiet mornings with coffee by the window. But underneath all of it, I could feel the pressure building, like thunder gathering behind a mountain. On the fourth morning after arriving, I woke to a stream of messages. Missed calls, frantic texts, and finally a subject line in Scott's tone of pure panic. Urgent. Call me now. I didn't open it. Not at first. I took my time feeding Noah, letting him play with his toy lamb, savoring the warm smell of oats and fruit. Only when Kate came in and nodded, "Okay now," did I sit down at the table and open the message. What I read made my blood run cold. "Emily, they froze all my accounts. I can't access anything. They took my laptop. I'm being questioned. They said I'm a flight risk. A flight risk. I need you to tell them I'm not running. Tell them I'm innocent. Please, please pick up your phone." A flight risk. That meant exactly what I thought it meant. I opened the next message. "They flagged my passport. I was supposed to meet with someone today and they stopped me at the airport. I can't leave the country. They're saying I'm part of a fraud scheme." His world was collapsing faster than even I imagined. Kate let out a low whistle. They move quickly when they have what they need. And they did. The recording, the forged accounts, the transfers, the expense manipulation, Linda's files, my confirmation of identity theft, it all pointed to Scott. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail. Even before playing it, I knew this version of Scott wouldn't sound like the arrogant man who walked around believing everyone else owed him something. I pressed play. His voice cracked immediately. "Emily, I need you. They're saying I did this on purpose. They think I used your name to hide it. You have to help me. Tell them I'm not dangerous. Please, they're talking about charges. Federal charges." He inhaled shakily, clearly trying to steady himself. "They said Mark left the country. They can't find him. They think I'm next. But I can't go anywhere. They banned me from leaving. I'm on a list. His voice broke. "Please, Emily, I can't lose my job. I can't lose everything." But he already had. I stopped the voicemail before it finished. For a moment, I said nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I simply stared at the screen, absorbing the truth. This was the consequence of his choices. This was the reality he'd built with every lie. This was the end he had carved for himself. Kate placed a cup of tea next to me and sat down. "You don't owe him anything," she said gently. And I knew she was right. He hadn't worried about losing me when he lied. He hadn't worried about his son when he canceled insurance. He hadn't worried about legality when he forged my name. He hadn't worried about safety when he talked about keeping me in line. He never worried about anything but himself. Later that afternoon, an email arrived from Agent Lane. "Mrs. Parker, we have formally designated you as a protected cooperating party. Mr. Parker is under travel restriction pending further investigation. We may request official statements in the coming weeks. Protected. Cooperating, not suspect, not complicit, not powerless." I read the email twice, letting every word soak into the parts of me Scott had tried to weaken. Then I did something I never thought I would do. I replied, "I'm willing to assist fully." After sending the message, I held Noah close and kissed the top of his head. The weight that lifted from my chest felt almost unreal, like exhaling after holding my breath for years. Scott was cornered. Investigators had him. Mark had vanished. Chloe had cut ties. Every door he once used to escape had slammed shut. And while his world shrank into a cage of consequences, mine was expanding. Because tomorrow would bring an unexpected kindness, a chance meeting that would change everything for me and Noah in a way Scott never saw coming. And that encounter would be the beginning of a life he could no longer touch. On the fifth morning in Zurich, the sky opened with a gentle snowfall, thin white flakes drifting lazily past the window like a slow, peaceful curtain. I bundled Noah into his soft blue jacket, tucked him into the stroller, and decided to take him for a walk along the lake while Kate went to a doctor's appointment. The cold air felt clean, almost sweet, filling my lungs with something I hadn't tasted in months. Relief untainted by fear. The lake shimmered beneath the gray sky, swans gliding gracefully across the surface like white strokes on glass. Noah giggled every time one flapped its wings, tiny boots kicking happily. I pushed the stroller along the path, letting the quiet sink into my bones. Each step felt steadier than the last. Then, near a wooden bench dusted with snow, I noticed a man kneeling beside an elderly woman, adjusting her scarf and tightening the wheels on her walker. His movements were gentle, patient. He had dark hair, a warm jawline roughened with morning stubble, and a long coat that looked practical rather than showy. When he stood, he caught me watching. Rather than looking embarrassed or defensive, he simply smiled, soft, open, unhurried. "Cold morning," he said, nodding politely. I nodded back. "Beautiful, though." He glanced at Noah, who was staring up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Hey there, little guy," he said kindly. Noah laughed. I couldn't help smiling. He likes friendly faces. "Well, then he must be a good judge of character," the man replied with an easy, gentle tone that didn't try too hard. The elderly woman patted his arm. "He's always helping people," she said proudly. "This one here, he has a good heart." He chuckled. "I'm her son," before she makes it sound like I rescue strangers for sport. He extended a gloved hand toward me. "I'm Daniel." His palm was warm even through the fabric. "Emily," I said softly. "Pleasure," he replied. "You visiting or living here?" It was such a simple question, but for a moment, my throat tightened. How do you explain running from a marriage, escaping forged crimes, slipping across an ocean to save your child? "Staying with my sister for a while," I said carefully. Daniel nodded, not pressing. "Zurich's a good place to breathe, slower, quieter." "That's exactly what I needed," I admitted. We talked for a few moments, about the snow, about the best bakeries, about the way Swiss trains always arrived on time. It felt strangely normal, easy, something I'd forgotten existed. As we spoke, his mother struggled to zip her coat. Daniel immediately stepped in without fanfare, gently pulling the zipper up while she muttered, "These hands aren't what they used to be." When he finished, I couldn't help saying, "Your mom's lucky. You're very patient with her." He shrugged lightly. "She raised me alone. It's the least I can do." The simplicity of the statement struck me hard, because Scott had never once shown that kind of natural, instinctive grace. Everything Scott did had been a performance. Daniel didn't act for show. His kindness felt rooted, lived in. We walked together for a few minutes, his mother shuffling slowly between us. At one point, Noah dropped his stuffed lamb, and Daniel noticed before I did. He picked it up, brushed off the snow, and handed it back gently. "Here you go, buddy. Can't lose something important." Something important. The words settled in my chest. Before parting ways, Daniel said, "If you ever need help finding your way around, I live nearby. My mom insists on daily walks, so I'm usually out here." His mother added, "And bring the baby again. He's adorable." I smiled genuinely. "I will." As they walked away, Daniel turned back once, giving a small wave. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't bold. It was simply kind. When they vanished around the curve of the path, I looked down at Noah, who was chewing on his glove and smiling. "That," I whispered, "is the type of man you deserve to see in your life, not the one we left behind." As we headed home, the snow thickened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world didn't seem dangerous. But while peace was beginning to grow around us, chaos back in New Jersey was reaching its breaking point, and Scott's downfall was about to become public. Back in New Jersey, while snow fell peacefully outside my window in Zurich, Scott's world was cracking open like thin ice beneath a desperate man. I didn't witness it in person, but the reports, the emails, and the recorded hearings painted the picture so clearly I could almost feel the humiliation seeping from him. The man who once strutted through his office with a polished smile and a stainless steel watch now walked through hallways with investigators at his heels. It started with a subpoena. His firm, Hartwell and Pierce, summoned him for an urgent internal review. He walked in, expecting to talk his way out, expecting colleagues to cover for him like they always had. But this time, no one smiled. No one nodded. No one even offered him coffee. Instead, he was escorted to a small conference room with glass walls. Waiting for him were two partners, the firm's HR director and Agent Lane. Scott tried to laugh it off. "Is this about the expenses? Look, I told accounting there was a mix-up." But Lane cut him off. "We have recordings, we have bank evidence, we have testimony. Sit." Scott sat, and for the next hour, they laid out every sin he thought he'd buried. The forged accounts in my name, the expense laundering scheme, the fake client dinners with Chloe, the fraudulent transfers funneled through Mark, the connection to high-risk lenders, the manipulated signatures, the missing receipts. Linda flagged. The attempt to pin everything on me, every piece of evidence slid across the table like a blade. Scott's face went pale, his voice cracked. He kept repeating, "This isn't what it looks like, and I can fix this." And finally, the most pathetic of all, I'm the victim here. Nobody believed him. Chloe had already flipped, Mark had vanished, and I, his safety net, was gone and unreachable. The firm ended the meeting with one sentence that destroyed him more than any legal threat could. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." He tried to protest, but 2 guards appeared and motioned him toward the door. People in the hallway watched silently, some curious, some satisfied, some shocked. But no one stepped in. No one defended him. No one even pretended to care. His carefully curated image cracked in front of everyone he once tried to impress. They made him empty his desk under supervision. They took his badge. They revoked his access. They even removed him from the firm's website by noon. The man who once lived for appearances was now nothing but a cautionary tale whispered beside office printers. When he got home, the collectors were waiting. 2 men in dark jackets stood near his door. Calm, cold, professional. "You missed payments," one said. "We need the rest now," the other added. Scott stuttered. I don't have it. I can get it." "No," the first man said. "You already said that before." They didn't hurt him, but they made it clear his time was up. They warned him that if he tried to leave the state again, they wouldn't ask politely next time. Shaking, Scott slammed the door behind them. He collapsed on the living room floor, surrounded by overdue bills, frozen accounts, and an empty silence he had never felt before. Then came the final blow. A formal letter from the court. Travel restrictions reaffirmed. Passport locked. Investigation ongoing. Potential charges pending. And below, one line written with ice-cold precision. Child custody considerations will depend on the safety and stability demonstrated by the parties involved. Scott knew what that meant. He had already lost me. He was losing his son, and soon he would lose everything else. That same evening, while Scott paced a small, dim condo drowning in the echoes of his own lies, I stood in a warm Swiss kitchen helping Kate prepare dinner. Noah laughed as he banged a wooden spoon on a bowl. The scent of fresh bread filled the air. Soft music played from the radio. Peace. Something Scott had never given us. As I rocked Noah to sleep that night, I whispered, "You will never live in fear again." Because his father, the man who thought the world owed him forgiveness, was finally facing the consequences he tried so hard to place on me. And tomorrow, in a courtroom thousands of miles away, I would speak the truth that sealed his fate forever. The morning of the custody hearing felt unreal, like standing at the edge of a cliff while sunlight finally warms your back. I sat at Kate's dining table in Zurich, Noah playing on the floor beside me, waiting for the video call to begin. The screen glowed softly, reflecting the calm I didn't fully feel yet. Today was the day everything would be decided, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually, in every way that mattered. Today was the day Scott would face the truth he spent years running from. Kate placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You're ready," she said. "You've been ready for a long time." When the call connected, the courtroom appeared on screen. Bright lights, dark wooden tables, a judge with tired eyes, and then Scott. The sight of him almost startled me. He looked thinner, older, shoulders hunched like someone carrying a weight he couldn't set down. His once perfect hair was unkempt. His eyes darted nervously. This wasn't the man who strutted through Manhattan pretending he was untouchable. This was a man stripped bare. "Mrs. Parker, can you hear us?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady even as my heart raced. We began. My lawyer presented the documentation, the forged accounts, the fraudulent transactions, the canceled insurance, the recording of Scott discussing how to manage me. Every piece of evidence built a wall he couldn't climb. Scott's lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to argue stress, pressure, misunderstandings, but the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Parker," she said sharply, "the pattern here is deliberate." Then Agent Lane stepped into frame, calm, professional. Holding a folder I recognized. "Your Honor, our investigation confirms that Mrs. Parker had no knowledge of any fraudulent activity," he said. "However, Mr. Parker engaged in repeated attempts to shift responsibility onto her. He also demonstrated intent to flee before his passport was flagged. Scott's face collapsed at the word flee. Then came the moment I had feared most, giving my statement. I breathed in slowly. For years, I began. I tried to make our home a safe place. I trusted Scott. I believed in him. But he didn't just break our marriage, he endangered our son. He forged my name. He risked our future. And he lied so easily that I stopped recognizing the man I married. Leaving wasn't revenge. It was survival. A long silence followed. The judge finally turned to Scott. "Do you have anything to say?" His voice cracked. "Emily, I just want my family back." I stared at him, feeling nothing. No hatred, no longing, only a quiet, tired finality. "My family," I said softly, "is safe. That's what matters." The judge straightened her papers. "The court awards full physical and legal custody of the child to Mrs. Parker. Mr. Parker will have supervised virtual visitation pending further outcome of the federal investigation. Financial restitution is ordered. Travel restrictions remain. Court adjourned." It was done. Scott's mouth fell open. His lawyer whispered frantically. But the decision echoed like a closing door, a heavy, final sound marking the end of his control. I ended the call and stared at my reflection on the black screen. Free. I was finally free. Noah crawled into my lap and giggled, completely unaware he had just gained a safer, brighter future. Kate burst into tears and hugged us both. "It's over, Em. You did it." Later that week, Daniel visited with his mother, carrying a small bouquet of winter flowers. He smiled gently when he saw Noah playing with the wooden spoon again. "I heard the ruling went well," he said, eyes warm. "I'm glad." His mother added with a wink. "He was pacing around all morning waiting to hear." I blushed, feeling something soft, something new, bloom quietly inside me. That night, standing by the lake with the moon reflecting off the water, I whispered to Noah, "We made it. This is our life now, and no one can take it." Scott's world had collapsed, exactly as he built it, on lies. Mine was rebuilding, slowly, beautifully, on truth. And that was the ending he could never rewrite. Never chase, never afford to touch again. And just like that, our story comes to an end. But hey, my dear friends, you're still here with me, right? If you've stayed all the way to this moment, maybe something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself. In the fear, the courage, the breaking, and the rebuilding. Life often tests us in ways we never expect, and as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Sometimes the very pain meant to destroy us becomes the force that sets us free. This story reminds us of something simple but powerful. Protecting your peace is not selfish, choosing yourself is not betrayal, and walking away from harm is sometimes the bravest act of love, especially when you're protecting a child, a future, or the dignity you almost forgot you had. Healing isn't loud. It's quiet steps, small choices, and the belief that you deserve better than fear. If this story gave you strength, clarity, or even just a moment of reflection, do me a small favor. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so we can keep walking these healing journeys together. You're never alone here.